In my last video, I solved a bunch of the challenges from the CTF app Beetlebug, and a lot of people seem to like that, and a bunch of people asked me in the comments to do some more challenges from that app. So in this video, I'm going to be solving 3 more of the challenges from that Beetlebug Android hacking CTF app. And just as a quick refresher, Beetlebug is a very insecure Android CTF app made for developers, pen testers, and bug hunters. And this is essentially just a beginner-friendly capture the flag app that you can use to practice a lot of those skills and techniques that you would need if you're an aspiring pen tester or bug hunter or anyone interested in learning about Android hacking. And I've already got the app installed on my emulator over here. This is an Android Studio emulator. I do have a video on my channel from a long time ago where I walked through setting up an emulator, but that video is pretty outdated at this point, and I'm actually planning on making another video soon on how to set up an emulator, and that's going to cover how to actually get one built, how to make sure it's rooted, how to make sure it works with Burp Suite and Frida and all those tools that you need to get you started on mobile pen testing. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and get started solving a couple of these challenges from this Beetlebug app, and the first one I'm going to do today is going to be under data storage, and I'm going to look at the SQLite database challenge. The hint for this one says, find out how sensitive credentials are being stored in plain text without encryption. And I'm supposed to save my master pin and use complex alphanumeric characters. Well, I'm going to make a very long password that is very secure and no one could possibly guess it. And I'm going to log in. And it says password is saved. And now I have to find where that password is being saved in the SQLite database. So just like we did before when we were looking at the files that were saved in the shared preferences, I'm going to drop into an ADB shell. And you'll notice that the prompt is a hashtag right now because we are running as root. If you had a $sign prompt there, then you would need to run su to get root access. And I'm going to cd to the data and the app.beetlebug directory. So now I'm in the application files for the Beetlebug app. And now we see the databases directory. So now if I look in the databases directory and I ls that, I see there is a user.db file. That sounds promising, a place that they're probably going to be storing data about the user. But if we just try to cat that user.db file like it was a regular text file or something, we just get a bunch of nonsense that's hard to really come up with anything valuable. But if we were able to actually download that file onto our local machine, then we can actually open it with a tool that is meant to read database files. So I'm actually going to exit the shell, and I'm going to run adb pull, which is the command that you use to pull a file off of the file system from an Android device. And I'm going to give it that path to that database file. And then when we run that, we see that we have that database file downloaded. And just a quick little aside, if when you run this pull command, you get a permission denied, that's because ADB is not running as root. So you would need to run adb root, which would restart adb as root. And then you would be able to access those privileged files under the /data/data directory. But now that we have that file downloaded, I'm going to open my SQLite database browser, which if you were using Kali, then it should already be installed. But if not, you should be able to download it. Just Google like SQLite database browser, whatever. You'll find it. But now I'm going to open database and select that file from the directory where we downloaded it. And now I'm going to go to browse data, and we see there's a table for metadata. That doesn't really help us. There's SQLite sequence. That doesn't really help us. And then there's users, which from the name, it sounds like that's probably going to hold information about the user. And when we select that table, we see our super secure password that no one could ever guess because it's very complex. But if anyone was able to access the file system of our device, whether that's because the device was stolen or some other app got installed on our phone that had elevated privileges, if they were able to access that databases directory, they could read our password in plain text. And now I believe this field right here is going to actually be the flag that we need. And when we submit that, flag captured. Next, I'm going to look under databases, and I'm going to take a look at the SQL Injection flag. And this one has a hint that says that there are 2 users in the database using a single search query output all 2 users. So this challenge just has a search field, and if I search for some random word, it just tells me whether or not that user exists. And we can guess that how the search term probably works is it probably goes and runs a SQL query on a database, and it returns any user that matches that string that we send in the SQL query. So I'm just going to send a very basic SQL injection string where I'm going to send a single quote at the end of the string that I'm sending, or 1 equals 1 and then dash dash, which should comment out whatever is at the end of that SQL query. I don't want to get too deep into how SQL injection works in this video. There's tons of resources out there on SQL injection, but basically it's just saying 1 equals 1 is always true, so it's just going to dump everything in the database. And we see the user is admin, there's the password, and there's the credit card, and there's another user, Beetle-Bug, and there's the password, and there's the credit card. And just based on the format that all the other flags that we've seen have been, I'm just assuming this credit card number for the Beetle-Bug user is probably going to be our flag. So I'm going to submit that. And we got another flag. So that was a very simple SQL injection challenge, but I think it is important to note that a lot of those common website vulnerabilities that you see in web applications, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, things like that are also valuable things that you need to check for in mobile apps as well. I've heard some people that were more familiar with web applications and just getting started in mobile applications, they kind of had this concept that, well, all those things are web application things and they don't really apply to mobile applications. But there is a very big overlap in the things that you should look for in a mobile application and things you should look for in a web application. So just be aware that there shouldn't be like a divide of like these things are web application vulnerabilities and these things are mobile application vulnerabilities and there's no overlap, because there is a lot of overlap. But now I just want to solve one more challenge for this video. I kind of want to do the biometric authentication challenge, but I feel like that could be difficult in an emulator since we don't actually have a biometric sensor that we can mess with. So I think I'm going to do the binary patching one instead. So for this challenge, we get a hint that says you need to be a super administrator to access the password manager. And clearly there's a button right here that says grant access, but it's grayed out and we can't click it. So we need to figure out how to actually enable that button in order to grant access to that flag. So I'm going to open up JADX and take a look at the source code and try to figure out where that button is actually being disabled and figure out how I can enable it. If you don't know where to start looking, you can just search for grant access and try to find that text of the button. And here we see that there is a button and the enabled is set to false, and we want to be able to click that button, so we want to change that enabled from false to true. Unfortunately, JADX doesn't really have a good way for us to edit the code, it just lets us read the code. So I'm going to use a different tool called APK tool, and I'm going to disassemble the APK, and that's going to give us all those individual files. So now I've gone to that /res/layout directory, which is where that XML file was that we found with that false setting that we want to change to true. And I'm going to open that XML file with a text editor. You can use any text editor you want. I'm going to use Vim. And here's where we found that button that is set to false. And I'm just going to delete false and replace it with true. And then I'm going to save that file. And I'm going to use APK tool to rebuild those files back into a new APK, including that edit that I just made. To do this, I'm just going to run APK tool B for build, the name of that directory where all those files were located, -O, and then whatever I want to name the APK, which I'm going to name it new_Beetlebug. So after that new binary is built, I can try installing it with ADB, but we get an error that says install parse failed, no certificates. That's because we need to re-sign that APK before we can actually install it. So we're going to have to use a couple tools to do this. First, we need to make a key store, and we're going to do this using the tool key tool. So our command is going to be keytool-genkey-v-key store, the name that you want to give your key store. I'm just going to call it my key store, -key-alg RSA-key size 2048 -validity, and you can make it valid for however long you want. I said 1,000 days because why not? -alias, and then whatever alias you want to give it. I said Android because I'm going to be using this for Android apps. And that's going to ask us for a key store password. And you want to make sure that you remember the name of your key store, your alias, and your password that you give it. And it's also going to ask you a few questions. You can just leave them all blank if you want. It really doesn't matter. So now to actually sign that binary with that key store that we made, we need to use the tool APK Signer. And we're going to do this with APK Signer sign -ks-key-alias, and then whatever alias you gave your key store, -ks, and then the name of that key store, and then the name of the binary that you want to sign, which in my case is new_beetlebug.apk. And then when you run that, it's going to ask for your password that you gave it. So now that I have that binary re-signed, now I'm going to try to reinstall that binary onto my emulator. And I see Beetlebug is installed. And once again, I go through the whole sign-up process, and now when I go to the binary patching section, now I see that that grant access button is no longer grayed out, and when I click it, there I see my flag, and it actually says that that's incorrect, which is strange because that is literally the exact flag that is listed right there. So I think there might be a bug here. So we're not going to be able to get the actual points to show up in the app for us, but we were able to accomplish our goal of patching the binary and changing that button to enabled instead of disabled, and then we're able to click that button to give us the flag. So we know that we did it correctly, and that's all that really matters. But I think that's going to be about it for this video. I hope you liked that. I know a lot of people that saw my previous video were asking for me to solve more of these challenges. If you want me to go over more of these challenges, I can do that. I might actually make a blog post on my website going through like a walkthrough of all the different challenges. But let me know in the comments what you want me to do. And just one more note before I go. Just the other day, I broke 5,000 subscribers, and that was like a goal of mine. I wanted to hit that before the end of the month, and I just made it a couple days before the month ended. Everyone who has subbed, I really appreciate it, and I hope that I can continue making videos that you'll enjoy and you'll get some sort of value from them. That'll be all for this one though, and I hope to see you in the next one.